Hello and welcome to another video on IELTS test. My name is Farooq, and in this video we'll be looking at various reading techniques, something that you can use for the IELTS reading module, and this is for both academic and the general training test. So let's get started. We are looking to polish our reading techniques because the time is limited in IELTS reading, and it's impossible to read very attentively or look at all the information, understand everything that's given to you. So one method we use to read quickly is speed reading. What we do is you only read the text according to the purpose of the question. So if you're looking for information, you read in a certain way. If you're looking to understand the text, you read in a different way. Now, there are two effective strategies to read quickly, and that's skimming and scanning. We will look at these in detail, look at these in detail, and also try and sort of use both of them together. Um, in and this should help us actually in um, doing our reading tests faster. All right, so let's look at skimming first. Skimming is basically to read the text quickly to understand or to get the main idea of the text. So we are only reading to get the main idea of the text. We're not reading for details. We're not reading to understand everything or every word that's given. This should allow us to get an impression, an overall impression of the text or a part of the text without looking at any details. We use this sort of technique when we are reading a long chapter of a book, when we're doing a research, researching a long article, etc. What we do effectively, what we can do is read the first few sentences of each paragraph and the end of the paragraph to understand a general to get a general understanding of the text of the paragraphs, and then you know exactly how the paragraph progresses. You can identify where you can find a certain information when you go back to the passage. We can use this technique for the initial reading. That is, we also call it pre-reading, which means before even looking at the questions, we do an initial reading to just go through and get a general understanding or an idea of what the text talks about. Now, we also read slower to answer the following question types. Now, if you want to figure out which paragraph a particular sentence or the idea given to you in a certain sentence occurs, we use we have to read slower, so we cannot do the skimming there. Or if we want to provide headings for a paragraph, sometimes the question says give us the title, or give what is the title of this paragraph. So and then you cannot do the skimming. Or when you're looking at the author's views, you cannot do the skimming as well. That needs detailed reading of the text. Now, how do we skim? A few steps that we need to follow. The first thing would be to read the first paragraph. This is done to get a general understanding of what the passage is going to talk about. And then you look at every paragraph, you look at a couple of first sentences in each paragraph, and then probably look at to look at the main idea, understand the main idea, and then you look at the end of the paragraph, maybe one or two sentences at the end of the paragraph. You also maybe use a pencil to underline important pieces of information like dates and names, etc. And then, like we read the first paragraph, we read the last paragraph attentively to get a summary of the passage. Now, let's look at one quick example of how we can skim, or how we can skim read. Now, if you look at this particular passage. It talks about what is capitalism, gives you the first paragraph, which is an introduction. And then there's class division, which is like the body of the paragraph. And then finally you have, you could say two main points, like the class division and the profit motive. We don't need to read the paragraphs to understand what the passage is talking about, because the headlines, the headings and the subheadings give us that information. But what we need to do is look at the first paragraph attentively, all the underlined sentences, and the last one. And then the middle paragraphs, you just need to read the first uh, sentence to understand what it's really talking about. So you don't need to read the entire paragraph to understand the whole passage. What we want to achieve is read this paragraph quickly, read this entire passage quickly without wasting much time. Plus, it also helps you locate what the information from this passage. The next technique, scanning. What does scanning mean? Scanning means to look for specific information, phrases in the text. You're probably looking at a specific term, um, like a name, a date, or any other specific word, um, as an answer. Now, it is always a good idea to underline keywords when you're reading. And this technique can be used, underlining of keywords can be also used in listening. It proves to be really effective. Now, the technique is used when you're answering different questions, like multiple choice questions, or matching the heading, match the following. So you can use a scanning technique to answer these questions. How do we do it? How do we scan? The first step is to look at, when you're doing, for example, when you're doing the skimming, you're just reading for information. You're just reading to get a general idea of the passage or the paragraph. You underline important dates or keywords, numbers, dates, names, etc., keywords that you feel are important in that sentence, underline them. And when you read the questions, you can go back to that part in the passage, in the paragraph, to identify your answer. That way you can do it really quickly. You don't need to read um, a lot to identify the answers. It just needs to be a quick sort of reading, a quick glance to locate the answer, and then write it in your question paper or your answer sheet. All right, so here's a quick look at what scanning looks like. So I'm just going to underline the keywords. The first one is social system. I'm doing the second word I'm underlining is capitalists. I'm underlining profit. So I feel these are important words. It could be anything. When I'm reading a particular paragraph, it could be any of these um, words or phrases that I feel are important, and we underline that, and that will help us come back and locate the answers in the text. The third technique we have is reading for details. This is a much slower reading process, which involves reading for understanding um, the information clearly in detail. What we do is we read every sentence, every paragraph, but we need to be aware of the time, so we need to make it quick as well. But as you read, there are times when you don't understand a particular word. What you need to do is just maybe underline the word and then infer the meaning, which means you could guess the meaning from the context. Look at the sentence around it, look at the paragraph, and how the word fits in. So it's not really important in IELTS reading to understand every word that we come across, but it's really important to get a general idea of what the passage talks about. Reading for details is certainly important in questions like true, false, not given, or summary questions. How do we do this how do we read for details? Now, here's where a combination comes into play. We scan for specific information, but since we don't have a lot of time to read the entire passage in detail, what we need to do is, when we look at a question, you know what it's asking for, you know it's what it's looking for, or what term it is looking for, or what idea it's looking for. You could probably locate it using the scanning technique. So you go to that particular location in the passage and you read around it to ensure that you get the correct answer, right? So you use these techniques in together. You don't use them individually but together. So you read for specific information, you skim or you scan, and then go back, read around it, get your correct answer. But also please make let's make this clear: there could be distractors, there could be words that have been used to confuse you, so you need to be really careful, especially with true false not given. A lot of candidates find it a lot of students find it difficult to to answer these true false not given or yes no not given questions. So some of the important tips for IELTS reading is: the first thing that we need to do is read the questions very quickly to get an idea of what type of information is required. You or what type of technique, or what technique is required, whether it's skimming or scanning, a combination of the two, or just reading for details. And when you're reading the question, you could also underline the important information in the question, and then you when you read the passage, you underline the keywords or phrases. After reading your questions, skim over the text, underline important words, mark important parts of the passage. And if you see any information, if you come across any information which relates to the question, you may remember the question, just write it or answer the question right away. Now we also need to be very careful. You need to somehow read the entire text to come across all the answers, to find out all the answers. But you'll find it easy um, to to find specific information by scanning. So that's something that you can do when you can scan. So the first step would be to skim, and then the step would be to scan for specific information, and then read for details around that area. This is all in this video. We spoke about reading techniques, we spoke about skimming, scanning, and reading for details. Remember, we ought to use all the three together to complete our reading, because you get 60 minutes to do all the tasks, including transferring your answers into the answer sheet. So please follow my channel for more tips on IELTS test, and I'll see you around in the next video.